Greetings, this is ETV World and I'm Zoeter Desalegn, here to shed light with you on who Abdel Fetah El Sisi is. Abdel Fetah El Sisi, born on November 19, 1954 in Egypt, chose very early on to pursue a military career, which is an excellent way to climb the social ladder in an Egypt overwhelmed by all sorts of obstacles. Sisi graduated from the Egyptian Military Academy in 1977, then served in the infantry. Mr. Sisi served in the infantry after graduating from the Egyptian Military Academy in 1977, rising to command a mechanized division. He went on to serve as military attaché in Saudi Arabia, chief of staff, and then commander of Egypt's northern military zone before being appointed head of military intelligence. On February 2011, Mubarak's ouster is appointed director of military intelligence and reconnaissance. Sisi also becomes the youngest member of the Supreme Council of the Armed Forces, the interim military authority comprised of senior military leaders. On August 12, 2012, appoints Sisi as Minister of Defense and Commander-in-Chief of the Armed Forces, who will eventually betray him. On July 1st, 2013, after widespread demonstrations, Sisi delivers the Egyptian military's message that the country's civilian government has 48 hours to meet the demands of the people, or the military will step in to restore order, and Egypt's military removes Morsi from power and Sisi sworn in as Deputy Prime Minister. On June 3rd, 2014, officially declared the winner of the presidential election with more than 96% of the vote. Within few days, El Sisi sworn in as president. On April 2017, a nationwide state of emergency declared by Sisi, and he, after 3 years, winning 97% of the vote. He sees himself as the contemporary embodiment of Egypt's grandeur. According to sources, no room for dissent voices under his regime, and hence Egyptians must tackle Sisi rather than the West. The call for the West to address the autocracy of President Sisi's government is problematic and is far from any form of democracy. Al Arabiya illustrates, quoting Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan few years back, Egypt's President Abdel Fetah El Sisi, an illegitimate tyrant. He is not different from his predecessors. Top of form, he comes from nowhere and led the military coup against Mohamed Morsi, the president elected by the people of Egypt. El Sisi's regime is also harsh against media. El Sisi has systematically attacked the press, imprisoned journalists, and silenced critical voices, said Tom Gibson, CPJ's EU representative. The European Commission should abide by its values and demand during El Sisi's visit that Egyptian authorities cease their repression of the media. The Commission cannot let business carry on as usual. Besides the European Commission, into U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken and National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan, urging the Biden administration not to provide its full proposed military aid to Egypt due to the country's treatment of journalists and other human rights abuses. The letter urged the Biden administration not to provide $300 million out of the proposed $1.3 billion in military aid to Egypt, noting that the additional $300 million is conditioned on Egypt meeting a set of conditions related to human rights and the rule of law. Egypt was in the world, according to Democracy for the Arab World Now, or Dawn, while 8 years in office, El Sisi's false promises were assessed. El Sisi promised to Egypt from perceived oppression under the Muslim Brotherhood-affiliated Morsi presidency, but he has than any government in Egypt's modern history. El Sisi has also immunized military officials from prosecution for crimes including mass killings of protesters in 2013. In July 2018, Parliament issued the law on the treatment of senior commanders of the armed forces, high-ranking military personnel protection and diplomatic immunity against criminal prosecution, including international prosecution. The government passed this law in light of specific concerns of international actions to indict security forces involved in serious human rights abuses and crimes against humanity before and after El Sisi's military coup, including the massacre of 1,100 protesters as well as other of protesters. El Sisi and the military have expanded control over Egypt's economy, with vast ownership of businesses throughout the country. Under El Sisi, the military's ownership, power, and control over the economy has dramatically increased, leading to a hybrid economy with military personnel, now largely major state-run projects, and reaping the public's profits. Companies owned by the military are typically exempted from tax and customs duties, including value-added tax, or on goods, equipment, machinery, services, public auditing, and civilian oversight pursuant to amendments to the government contracting law by El Sisi's government in 2018. El Sisi promised enhanced freedoms but expanded restrictions on civil society. El Sisi promised to Egypt from perceived oppression under the Muslim Brotherhood-affiliated Morsi presidency, but he has than any government in Egypt's modern history. El Sisi used the security deterioration following the military coup against Morsi to issue several draconian executives to control the public sphere. Because of these repressive laws, there are today more than 65,000 Egyptians for their political association and speech. El Sisi promised greater protection for women, but the repression and abuse of women has increased under his government. The statistics of violence against women in Egypt are staggering. In 2020, a survey conducted by the National Council for Women and the Central Agency for Public Mobilization and Statistics that each year about 5.6 million women suffer violence from their husbands or fiancés. About 2.4 million women suffer serious injuries because of that violence, and 1 million women leave the marital home due to domestic violence. About 200,000 women experience complications in pregnancy because of domestic violence, and at least 75,000 women report incidents of violence to the police. No access to information with El Sisi as the gatekeeper, media experts characterized as against the press. Reporters Without Borders 2021 World Press Freedom Index reflects that the El Sisi government's repressive approach, and Egypt ranks 166 among 180 countries. Scholars critical of El Sisi portrayed him as sovereigns in a sovereign homeland. In general, the people of Egypt went to Tahrir Square for weeks. Yet, where is the fruit of their demand? A legitimate struggle by the people of Egypt, but snatched by El Sisi ruling Egypt by iron fist, using the power of a gun. Millions of Egyptians are still silenced in successive regimes and may be groomed for another dictator after 2030 when Sisi's term expires. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up this segment of ETV World. Make sure to follow us and subscribe to our social media to get more captivating content on national, continental, and international issues.